Uh, I'll try to speak a little louder. I do have a cold, so I'm trying to keep it, so do bear with me. And anyways, I stand between you and lunch, so I'll try to make it very, very quick and short. When I was asked to come and talk today, one of the sort of the questions I had was, okay, well, do you want, what is it that we should be talking about? Who is in the audience? And I believe, there's obviously there are a few startups here, but there are also regular retailers and OEMs looking to understand the opportunities within e-commerce and if they should be doing this and what they should be doing. So what I thought was I'd sort of just provide a very sort of an overview landscape of what the sort of the opportunity of e-commerce is. You've obviously seen a few numbers. I'll try to break down those numbers for you and try to explain to you what are going to be the real fundamental drivers for e-commerce in India, and then talk about why multi-channel is going to be important over here. Do ask me questions. We'll probably sort of leave a few. I actually like to keep it very interactive, so if you do have any questions, do jump in between itself rather than waiting all the way to the end. This was the promise that was shown to everybody, right?
Hello?
The online
Hello?
population
the session
in
has
India
started.
is large,
Please proceed.
and is expected to grow even more. This is true. That the overall online pop numbers in India are anywhere from 110, 120 million, expected to grow to approximately 400 million.
The session has started. Please proceed.
But I think one of the fundamental things that people need to think about is, yeah, the online pop numbers are big and they're growing, but where are they accessing the internet from? What is the access speeds that they have? And what devices are they accessing the internet from? Because that has a fundamental basis of what type of behavior a customer does. So what we did is, so this is the overall projected number for the overall online pop, but we sort of did a very simple cut and said, okay, within the metropolitan markets in India, where do they access the internet from? Now, 68% of them are accessing it at home, and 38% from work, and the remaining is from sort of public places. Now, if you think about the overall number of the 120 odd million number that's currently today, and you sort of project that out to the overall Indian landscape, this number sort of changes, will change when minute you start going to tier 2, tier 3 cities, where the usage of internet is going to be even more broader in public spaces. The other thing to note is the big number that you see, the online pop numbers that you see, also has mobile in there. Now, obviously, mobile internet is going to play a larger role in a market like India, but also the fundamental behavior of what people will be transacting on the mobile devices is going to be very different from what they've been transacting on the e-commerce side. I was just having the discussion with the gentleman earlier on to say, what percentage of overall e-commerce will be represented through mobile commerce. Now, obviously, there are a lot of numbers that are thrown out, but I think what needs to be very careful about is when you're sort of thinking about and looking at what is being projected. There are certain categories, obviously, that do very well within the mobile platform, and there are other categories that need a lot more curating. Where I think the mobile plays a larger role in this is not necessarily in the direct transactional channel, but more as an enabler for offline retail. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But anyways, so understanding where your traffic is coming from is also very important to understand what the real opportunity is. So keeping that in mind, this was the promise of e-commerce. E-commerce is going to be big in India, and I still believe that to be the case. But now let's sort of step back for a second and think about, okay, e-commerce in India is largely a new phenomenon. I've shown this slide in the past as well of, generally speaking, markets take a similar path when it comes to development of e-commerce. Now, obviously, not everybody moves in the same pace. Certain markets move a little faster than others. But largely speaking, from a behavioral perspective, this is how it evolves. If you think about it, Facebook is a recent phenomenon, recent compared to 95, 96, where it was primarily sort of a communicating utilitarian device where consumers first went online to essentially communicate with other folks. So it was email was largely the behavior that people had. Then you sort of moved on to sort of business services. Online banking is an interesting one because even though it's a more riskier proposition because you're actually going in and looking at your bank account, you're looking at, or you're transacting money. But consumers fundamentally believe banks to be a very safe place and have a lot of faith in the financial institutions that there's with money-back guarantees and so on and so forth. Travel has fundamentally been a key driver for e-commerce, regardless of which market you look at. Be it India, when Air Deccan came into play and that really started pushing the online channel, to Gol Air in Brazil, which was basically a bus service provider that wanted to sort of get into the airline business and figured the only way they could make money is to sort of squeeze the margin and started selling online. So that was a fundamental way of how people sort of moved to the online channel. Then you sort of move on to sort of what we say is comparable goods. So it's, all starts from, so Flipkart started with books, low ticket items, low consideration, not a lot of research required. It's, it's 200 rupees of risk that you're taking when you're buying a book. Or to comparable goods, a Samsung 40-inch LN B2 model is the same whether you go to Chroma or whether you go to an online site to buy it. It's the same model. So essentially, the feature sets are the same, the product is the same, it's the price is what basically makes the differentiation. So that's what people sort of graduate to. And then moving on to sort of more subjective product categories. This is how largely the evolution of e-commerce is. Now, obviously, certain markets grow at a faster rate than others. So keeping that in mind, so what we've done is sort of mapped out where all the different countries are in this evolution of e-commerce. We believe that India is more in line with where Mexico is, even at the level of scale that it is in, and also from a developmental perspective. Doesn't mean that nobody in India is buying apparel. Yes, they are, but I'm talking about at a large level of how people, what sort of fundamental behaviors we're seeing from a consumer perspective of where countries are as far as their phases of e-commerce development. And that's where, our belief is, if you think about sort of the largest category in India, it's travel. And if you sort of look beyond travel, it generally is consumer electronics followed by apparel. You sort of start seeing similar things. So a lot of the subjective categories, other subjective categories aren't there. But it's also not there, not because consumers aren't necessarily willing to buy, but also because the merchants haven't really started pushing those categories. And that's where there's a lot of discussion on, you can't really sell on price, you need to start figuring out niche categories. Well, that's what it basically means. You need to start thinking about other product categories with higher product margins that you can sell. And that's where, that's what the natural evolution of the market will be within India. This is subjective. Now, where does it actually sit in from the actual numbers perspective? So we believe that e-commerce in India is currently around 75 billion rupees or so. The expected growth rate is definitely there. If you look at it from a breakdown perspective, you sort of break down the actual numbers on where they sort of sit. As I had said, it's the sort of the comparable goods that sort of make up the large part. So sort of computers and consumer electronics make up a large chunk of what the overall market is. This also includes mobile phones. It's a simpler buy in comparison because there is no subjectivity involved. Does it fit right? Does the color suit my skin tone? Does the fabric feel the way it should? Does the shoe fit exactly what it's supposed to be? Because brand A is different than brand B in the way it's cut. A TV versus a mobile phone is more or less the same. And then there's a lot of showrooming that goes on as well, where people will sort of do a lot of cross-channel research before they actually are buying something online. And that's very prevalent, especially in the consumer electronics space and the PC space. Once you've identified that, look, a 40-inch TV will look right in my living room, and you go and look at it and say, yep, it doesn't look that big, then you start thinking about what price that you want to pay, and then you start sort of, you start shopping around. So largely, this is where retail is. And yes, so the growth rates are pretty spectacular, 57% growth. But remember, we're coming off a very small base. But where does this sit as compared to the overall retail number? So I just wanted to sort of give you this snapshot. Where does India sit in compared to the other countries? Yes, it's a great CAGR story where the growth rates are approximately about 50-odd%. But when you compare to the other e-commerce markets, we're actually quite low in the totem pole. The way to sort of think about the slide is, there's obviously the growth rates on the on the vertical axis, and the percentage of total retail sales that are represented as part of e-commerce is on the horizontal axis. So for example, UK, in our opinion, is the most developed e-commerce market. Now from a dollar perspective or pounds perspective, UK is much smaller than the US, but given its the geographical size of the country, the percentage of retail that moves to the online channel is a lot greater than the US is. US is approximately $200 billion as an overall retail number, not including travel. UK is smaller than that, but as a percentage of total retail is a lot larger. Now, India, on the other hand, as a percentage of total retail is extremely small. But what does that mean? That means is there a lot of opportunity? Yes, there is. In my belief, given the fragmented nature of retail and the overall retail in India, is actually an opportunity for e-commerce. And here's the reasons why. I just moved here 5 months ago to this country. And my wife was pulling her hair. She's like, you know, I needed to go get something for my schools, for my kids' school thing. I had to go to 5 different stores to buy those things. So their availability and product selection is a big deal because you're going to 5 different small stores. One guy has this pen and the other guy doesn't have chart paper and the third person doesn't have, whatever glue stick that they wanted. So it became an issue. So the fragmented nature of retail actually is an opportunity for e-commerce, because if you think about why people buy online, yes, price is important. That's the lowest common denominator. But beyond price, it is availability and product selection. So it actually brings up, it's actually, in my opinion, finding out those product categories is an opportunity within e-commerce in India. So that is what I believe is also going to be the next big thing in development over here. So let's break down sort of the 57% CAGR and the growth rates and the spectacular growth rates that we see. This is a very simple slide, but a very important metric to understand. So if you break down the growth rate, the year-over-year growth rate of e-commerce in India, what this is primarily trying to tell you is that, which is true for all developing markets, that growth is going to be coming from incremental net new buyers. So it's going to come less from people spending more on your site and more from more people coming on your site on a year-to-year basis. So customer acquisition is an important aspect as well. The tactics that you evolve is an important aspect as well. But now let's talk about wallet shift, or sort of spending per buyer. That becomes increasingly important in the next year or two for a lot of companies, and if you see a sort of fundamentally how many people buy a particular product category, in a market like the US, it was about 5 product categories in 2006. That gradually has increased to around 7.8 product categories that a customer buys. Essentially, that basically means that a customer is buying across 7 to 8 different product categories, and hence the wallet shift will be sort of the driving force in the future. So if you think about, currently it's about acquisition, but you need to start thinking about category, increasing category selection, increasing wallet, getting a larger share of the wallet as fundamental drivers of e-commerce in the future. So, sort of different tactics for different times of, from the development phase of e-commerce. So what is going to drive the growth of e-commerce? This is not supposed to be in any order of importance. But if you think about it, the 2 largest fundamental drivers of e-commerce from a consumer behavior perspective, regardless of which market you're looking at, be it the US, be it India, be it China, are essentially 2, is income and tenure. Income essentially means you have larger disposable income, you have more money to spend, and therefore you're more likely to be more technology savvy, because you're just you're likely to have an iPad, you're likely to have a PC, you're likely to have internet connection, and you're likely to even spend more money. And then tenure. So regardless of everything else, these are the 2 main important things that are correlated with e-commerce. Now, tenure is basically how long have you been online. Now, the longer you've been online, the more likely you're to do more sophisticated activities. The more sophisticated activities you're going to be doing, the more time you're going to be spending online, and hence you're going to be spending more time and money online. The point of this slide is, as someone just asked me, what is the biggest lesson that a lot of these startups should think about? And I said, look, e-commerce in India is not a 2020, it's a test match. Basically what that means is tenure is essentially, people just getting more experience and more used to the product channel. And that just comes with time. People spend more time with the channel. People spend more time researching products, and therefore they buy product categories. They start off with one, say a product category like books, and they move on to larger ticket items. And it's just not the larger ticket items, it's just they sort of start exploring other product categories that they want to buy. And that's what happens with tenure. The other big thing is obviously merchant capitalization and merchant push. Now, there's obviously a lot of VCs who've invested a lot of money. In comparison, not that much compared to what China has, but still, even from an Indian perspective, there's a lot of money that's coming. There are a lot of startups over here. Some of them will survive, some of them won't survive. But I think what will really push the channel is when multi-channel retail becomes a reality in this country. When multi-channel retailers start pushing the online channel, that's when the needle will really start shifting. So again, let's go back to the travel example. Online travel was always growing in the US, but you know what really pushed the needle of online travel in the US? Any guesses? 9/11. 9/11 really pushed the needle. And why did it push the needle? Because guess what? 9/11 happened, the airlines had huge margin issues. They were obviously shut down for 4 days. And shutting down for 4 days with that much cost is a big burden. When they started coming back online, they were already selling online, but after 9/11, they really started taking on to the online channel. They started really pushing it. They started giving extra bonus points. They started pushing. They started believing in their online channel. They pushed the online channel. They pushed the online channel. The ad networks. They pushed the online channel. Even the customer relation, when people would call in, they would charge people more money to sort of book through the call center. That pushed the needle. And when that pushed the needle, essentially people started migrating towards the online channel. Obviously, not the best scenario to be in. 9/11 was a terrible thing, but that's what really pushed the needle for bringing it. And when the airlines really started pushing the online channel, that's when air travel online really moved, and hotels followed similarly after, because airlines generally has a halo impact on car and hotel bookings, and hotels started pushing the online channel as well. So when merchants start pushing the online channel, especially these multi-channel or large merchants start pushing the online channel, that's when you have real movement in e-commerce. So, we asked this question in our survey, like, why do you not buy online? So if you go back to the previous slide where we sort of said, what are sort of the drivers? So obviously there's tenure and there's logistical issues, but why do people not buy online? It's not because they don't have a credit card. It's not because they, yes, some people don't want to give their financial information, but largely speaking, if you look at all the things that I've said and read, it's too complicated. Well, what does that mean? That basically means I haven't really tried the channel. When I do, I'll realize it's not that complicated, and it'll be easy for me to buy, and it's actually more convenient for me to buy online than it's buy offline. I believe the products will not be delivered in good condition. That basically means I don't trust the logistical companies that are going to be delivering my product. Either A, it's going to be broken, or B, it's not going to be what I thought it is that I actually purchased. This is not anything new. This is exactly what we've seen in every market, that essentially as clients are sort of pushed, as consumers are pushed to the channel, they start buying more, they start researching more, they start using the online channel more, they start, the needle starts moving. And I don't want to give my financial information. Now, when credit cards start becoming more of have a larger presence in India, you will see the needle moving as well. Now, why? Now, obviously, COD, if you think about how people pay online, I think in our research says about 55% of people prefer to pay through cash on delivery, which is probably the case for most e-commerce guys, right? That your majority of your transactions are happening on COD. It's a big margin suck for a lot of you guys. It sucks away margins from cash flow. It sucks away margins from returns on delivery. It's a pain. And also, credit card companies, when they start, at least in a lot of the markets, including in India, they have money-back guarantees. When credit card penetration increases, this will also move the needle as well. So again, I go back to the 2020 versus test match. I was asked this question before. I said, are Indians bigger deal hunters? I mean, are they more price conscious? They're not any more price conscious than other buyers in other markets. we have a very simple attitudinal question of saying, okay, well, do you like to shop around, meaning do you like to shop around for prices before you make a purchase? Yeah, they're almost at par with the Chinese consumers or the Australian consumers or the other ones. Is brand more important to you than price? Yeah, they're almost the same. What does this mean? This means that they're as price conscious as anybody else in the world. They're not necessarily more price conscious. So what that essentially means is what the guy from Jabong was also saying, that, look, prices, yeah, it's important. Yeah, we agree it's important. It's the lowest common denominator that people will come to. As long as price parity is there, why do customers come back to shop online? They come back to shop online from the same site because they've had a better experience. And better experience simply means the product that I got was the product that I selected. The product came in time. The customer service rep that I called answered me properly and answered my queries properly. That's simple stuff. That's the number one reason beyond price why people come back to shop from a particular product site. So it's not about price. People in India are not more price conscious than everywhere else. It essentially comes down to the fundamentals of providing a good customer experience for consumers to shop online. And that's always been the case and will continue to be the case. Even today, when you ask this question, even in a developed market like the UK or the US, it's still the same. It always comes down to customer experience, beyond price, obviously. Actually, people will pay 5% or a certain amount more for your product compared to, say, xyz.com, because they believe if you are say within a similar price point. We've actually tested this. We said, okay, well, would you pay X percentage more for a product for a retailer that you actually trust more than the other retailer? You'd be surprised how many people will say yes to that, because if they believe they're going to get what they've paid for, they will be willing to pay you slightly more just because of the service and the convenience and the experience that you provide. So, brings me to the second point. If you think about consumer behavior and how it's evolving, consumers are now starting to think of various channels, not as channels, but as touch points. So now I'm assuming we are a pretty sophisticated crowd here, right? But even if you go beyond the sophisticated crowd outside, people are touching your brand at least at the minimum in 1.5 to 2 different channels, right? So they either have a smartphone, they've either gone to the web, or they've either gone to a web through an internet cafe, or they've actually gone to your store, or at the minimum, they've called in, right? So there are multiple touch points. So customers are not thinking of interacting with you as a retailer, or with you as the OEM, or with you as a brand, particularly from one channel, which has traditionally been sort of the store outlet. But they're now starting to sort of touch you from different places. Now, Indians generally tend to be a lot more, in my opinion, if you think about the social media profile of Indians versus Americans versus Chinese, Indians and Chinese are actually a lot more social media savvy than the Americans and the British folks are. What that basically is saying is, when it comes to certain types of behavior, the online customer is a lot more engaged in India than they are, say, in other parts of the market for this social media profile. So they're basically discussing your brand as well. They're discussing, they're interacting with your brand in different ways that you can't even think about, through a blog, through a social media profile, just through looking up content on your site. So if you think about, because there are different touch points where customers are looking at you, and so ignore the actual dollar sales numbers, because think of that as just directional at best. And these are not Forrester numbers. This is a publication called Internet Retailer 500, which looks at the top 500 e-commerce players in the US. What I did is I just pulled the top 20 retailers e-commerce retailers in the US. Now, barring Amazon and Liberty, all these guys are multi-channel retailers or OEMs. Essentially, that's where the real opportunity, even in this market, is. Because multi-channel retail inherently has a slightly higher advantage over pure plays, consumers are looking across multi-channel to either transact with you, to research, or to buy from you. So what this means is, yes, Amazon is the Walmart of of online, even though Walmart doesn't like to think that way, but Amazon is the Walmart of the e-commerce play in the US. But beyond Amazon, if you look at the top 20, it's basically multi-channel retailers. Staples is both an offline and online channel. In fact, it's a B2B as well as a B2C channel online as well as offline. Dell and Apple, they're essentially OEMs. Apple typically is actually an OEM who's selling online but also has retail outlets, which is very unlike most PC manufacturers. But Dell has been selling online for the longest time, so they're direct OEMs selling at the B2C channel. So this is where the larger opportunity lies. And here's a metric that we've been covering for a long time, and I always get asked by a lot of the multi-channel retailers, and this is a metric which is extremely important to a lot of multi-channel retailers. So when Target.com is going to its CEO, they are looking at the ROI of Target.com or Walmart.com, not primarily through the transactions that move through that channel or the online channel, but the influence that that site is having on its overall retail business. So for every dollar that's spent online in the US, approximately $5.50 are influenced as a result of research that's done online to the offline channel. Now, the whole notion of influence is quite broad, right? Influence could mean anything. Influence actually means anything. It could mean I went to the store, I just wanted to know what are the store hours. Because I cannot go, I'm at work, I need to go after I'm done with work, so therefore I need to know what the store hours are for the local store that's next to near me. Or I need to know the direction. So that's what we call as very low-level research. To sort of the high-level research of, I know I want to buy a crib for my baby, but I need to know, or a baby stroller, but I need to know the technical specifications of what's the right baby stroller that will fit my needs. I'm an urban person that likes to walk around quite a bit. I don't really have a car, so I need something that's very light and can be collapsed very quickly. Very technical things to look at. You're good. So that's the type of research that people will do online. So that's what we like to say is sort of high-level research. So you're looking at what technical or product features that fit your needs best. And then once you've identified that, then comes sort of what brand and what price I need to pay. So, if you look at the spectrum of research, it's quite broad, and it ought to be quite broad because, the purchase funnel, the purchase decision mechanism is quite lengthy. The web touches multiple areas of this purchase decisions. So the web influence on your overall retail dollars is actually a lot higher. And when when I was asking, who is in the audience? I said there are a lot of these, retailers who are looking to sort of get into the e-commerce place. There are a lot of OEMs thinking about selling directly to consumers. I would like to just say one thing. If you want to sort of take away one thing from this presentation, I would just like to say is when you're thinking about the return on investment on your site operations, don't think of just the pure transactional rupees that move through that site, meaning how much transaction were you able to sort of move through your website, but what impact did it have on your overall business? Because that's a much larger number. Yes, it's subjective, but it's a much larger and a truer metric to look at than just pure transactions that move through the channel. So then sort of this is, we asked within our consumer survey in India, say, okay, well, what resources do you use when you research online? Obviously, in-store is the largest because you're going to the store and you're looking at researching products. Friends and family is pretty large as well. Online is down there. It was only 8%. But let's keep that in perspective, that compared to a market like the US, the online penetration in India is only about 8%. So it's really low online penetration. So obviously this will be low as well, the number is online as a resource. But the important thing is, did you change your mind after doing the research? 20% of them said, yes, we changed our mind about the brand that I wanted to buy. So if you think about just the pure numbers of if 8% are doing research online and 20% of that 8% actually change their mind, that's 2% transactional lift that you could probably get because of the research that somebody did. And that's just because only 8% of people are now currently using the internet to research, and that number is going to grow exponentially, especially with mobile. Mobile is going to have a larger impact, less from the transactional perspective and more from an influence perspective, meaning people are going to be using the mobile phone while they're either in the store or while they're commuting to figure out what product category or what brand or what price they need to pay for a particular thing that they're looking to buy. So, and then we ask the same question, okay, what resources do you trust the most? Obviously, recommendation from friends and family will be high, especially in a market like India. But beyond sort of your general consumer reviews and professionally written reviews, which sort of score the highest, information on company website was up there as well. It's actually a lot more important, in my opinion, than obviously all the other forms of advertisement as well. So consumers are actually looking to come to your site, you, Mr. OEM, or you or your brand manager, to actually learn more about your product. They want to, they trust you and the content that you have on your site, giving technical specifications and product information, and they trust that more than sort of the tweets that you're going to have, or the social media spending that you're going to do, or the advertisement that you're going to do. This is a very important metric to understand, because this basically means the power that the sort of the content that you have on your site to really help customers make informed purchase decisions. The last point that I'm going to make is, this is a complicated slide, and it's meant to be complicated. But think of this simply is, all the different dots are the touch points that customers have with you. From the various channels, be it mobile, be it in-store, be it kiosk, be it online, be it at a call center, all the different sort of touch points they have. So the sort of the larger, sort of the bigger circle is sort of the typical purchase decision that you go through. Sort of you go through discover mode, you search, you research for a product, then you compare, you look at Sony versus Samsung, or you look at, Bata versus Liberty shoes, then you decide, and then you make the purchase. You are looking at different, customers look at these different, they're looking at all these different touch points to do all these different purchase decisions. During the research process, they could be going to the store and trying on a different pair of shoes, but they could also be going online and looking at what other options do I have available, or what are the different prices that people are offering. So from a price comparison perspective, and that doesn't end there, because once they made that, they're going to use the product. And if they don't understand it, they're going to call into your call center to get help, or actually go to your site to figure out, well, how do I assemble this baby crib that I just bought? So they're going to come to your site, or they're going to call the call center, or they're going to call somebody to come into your house to sort of assemble that crib. They're going to share and personalize. They're going to personalize the product that they have. So depending upon, so it's not just about purchasing, but it's also about using, and then finally about evangelizing. Evangelizing your brand, evangelizing your store, is customers use different touch points. So the point of this slide, of this really complicated circle, is essentially multiple touch points, customers make multiple product decisions, and you have the ability to sort of convince them and change their minds. And it does work. And that's where the larger opportunity for even e-commerce, for a lot of the multi-channel retailers is. I think I'm going to end with that. Thank you very much for your time. I'm happy to take any questions that you guys have. Yeah. Just speak up.
What's the average value of a single transaction on an online sale?
So the question is, what is the AOV, right, of a single transaction? That varies by category. It's tough to say what is the AOV, because when you ask consumers, the average order value will be, depending on which markets that you're serving, will be around anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500. Yeah, so in the US, it's $120, depending on whom you ask, and if you ask the retailers, they say $80. In India, it's the same thing. When we survey customers, we say, okay, how much did you spend on a typical product? It's anywhere from 1,000 rupees to 2,200 rupees. That's what the average order value is. But that is typically, we've surveyed in metropolitan markets, right? When you sort of go, we haven't really surveyed in the non-metropolitan markets in tier 2, tier 3 cities. But from the anecdotal evidence that I've been able to gather from multiple sort of retailers who are sort of selling, who suddenly now see a lot of business coming from tier 2 and tier 3 cities, they're actually surprised with the AOV they're actually getting from these smaller markets as well. But again, it depends on the category. Now, obviously, the people that I've spoken to are generally in the apparel business, who've shared this data with me. So it's actually skewed because it's primarily in the apparel space. But it can be as high as about 3,200 rupees and as low as about 600 rupees. So that's the general range.
Thanks. And which is the top category?
Sorry?
Which is the top category?
What's the top category? At an overall, from an overall transactional perspective, it's consumer electronics and PCs. And within that, it's mobile is probably the largest one, then followed by PCs. But those obviously will be the large categories because the GMV on that category is a lot higher. The actual AOV, I mean, it will be a lot higher.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My question is related to mobile. You said that India is following the same trends as other markets in terms of evolution of e-commerce. But one thing where we're a little different from some of these developed markets is that the mobile penetration, people who access internet on mobile vis-a-vis the overall internet access is skewed towards mobile. So can mobile play a different role in a market like India? Can it actually move from an enabler to a revenue channel, a serious revenue channel anytime sooner?
So I've been asked this question quite a lot. Will mobile? So yes, India has leapfrogged when it comes to mobile penetration to a lot of other markets. I was just talking to somebody and I asked, is 3G, 2G rollouts, is that having a real impact on the actual ARPU that you're seeing? Yeah, it is. But basically, another metric, and I think the guy from Lightspeed just said there are about 30 million smartphones in India, but only a third of them are accessing data. So what does that mean? That means is, yeah, there are people who are going to be accessing the internet. But I think what you need to understand is, even in a market like the US, depending on whom you believe, the numbers are, m-commerce represents single digits, maybe 6 to 7% of overall e-commerce sales. Now, will it play a larger role in India? My fundamental belief is that people are not going to be buying PCs and consumer electronics on their mobile device. It can make a fundamental difference in certain product categories. So a product category like Groupon, for example, when they launched their mobile platform, they went from 0 to 25% of all transactionals moving to the mobile channel in less than 6 months. So it played a pretty large role in moving dollars from the overall online channel to the mobile channel. But it's also a difference in the category because you're buying a coupon, but the actual you're actually consummating that in the offline channel. Yeah, you buy it, but the service happens in the offline channel. So mobile will play a larger role in certain categories, but do I believe that m-commerce will be bigger than e-commerce? I personally don't believe that. Yeah.
How much is the credit card penetration in US vis-a-vis India, and how much the role it plays in enabling the e-commerce business?
So I don't have the exact numbers. Obviously, the total credit card penetration on a per capita basis is a lot higher in the US than in India. People generally have multiple cards. Here's how I think about this. Cash on delivery is been the way sort of people have sort of been buying online over here because it's a way for them to experiment, right? They don't need to sort of really need to commit to making a purchase. Where I think it starts making a difference is from a credit card perspective is if you think about so for example in the US, because you asked me to compare to the US, when you asked about this very simple question of why do you not buy online, and a lot of people in the late 90s they said I think my financial information will get compromised, or I'm uncomfortable giving my credit card information online. That changed because credit card companies started educating people on simple stuff such as money back guarantee. Meaning if there's a fraudulent transaction that happens, they will actually return that money to you or put it credit back into your account. That actually had a big impact. So that, in my opinion, plays a big catalyst as part of moving e-commerce. Let's look at a market like Germany, right? In Germany, people generally don't like to use credit cards for transactions, so they use bank transfers. But also, even though they're using bank transfers, the banks sort of, people trust the banks, will have a very secured transactional model, and they don't believe that their financial information will get compromised. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be credit card only, because we've seen other examples in other markets. But will COD be with the way forward of how it'll, will it take it from, the 75 billion rupees to whatever, the 400 odd billion rupees? No, credit cards will have to play a larger role in this. Not just credit, but even debit cards as well, sorry, yeah.
So looking at the current state of e-commerce industry in India, as you said that 55% of any customers for any company are coming on the base of COD. So what phenomena do you see in the coming future? I mean, do you think that for the repeat customers, the share of COD will reduce? Or, say up to 2015?
Yeah, so 55% is not true for everybody. Some sites actually have lower. It has to reduce. Because otherwise a lot of e-commerce guys will lose their shirts. And they are doing things to reduce it. They're incentivizing customers to sort of pay through credit cards, either by giving discounts or, for example, they're blacklist customers who are sort of repeating CODs and sort of returning orders on a COD basis. It has to come down. Do I believe it'll go away in the next 5 years? I don't think so, because just the overall card penetration isn't going to be there to the scale in India. But to a large extent, it will be driven by the merchants themselves, who will sort of move to the COD business. You know what interests me? Like, I buy an airline ticket almost every week. And I never noticed this, but in Jet the other day I was noticing, and I just go to pay with a credit card, and I saw cash on delivery. I'm like, wait, how are they doing this? So I'm actually going to try that out one day and figure out, like, will they still honor the price of the ticket that what if I say no, I don't want the ticket anymore once the guy comes to me? So I'm actually interested in that. But yeah, so I think a lot depends on the merchant themselves of how they sort of push that. But it's going to be a slow, hard process.
Because it's become kind of a DNA of Indian consumers as of today, if you talk about referring to e-commerce for COD.
Yeah, but yes, but if you start incentivizing customers saying, okay, I'll give you a 2% discount if you use a credit card, guess what? You know what? For the same product, if they made the decision, that they will move to that channel. And remember the power of miles through credit cards. That also pushes people to move through card-based transactions. So that will also push the needle as well. Yeah. Just speak up.
You mentioned the average e-commerce size in India is around. Average e-commerce size in India is around 75 billion INR, right? Yeah. And I wanted to know whether it is the gross sales or the net margin to e-commerce player.
That's the gross sales. And
the second question is the average online tenure, which you mentioned that in India is low as compared to US. What is the exact figure? What is
It's a simple math formula. Basically, just looking at tenure is basically how long you've been online. And tenure in India will continue to remain low just because the incremental online population is coming online, because it's a growing market, right? So in a market like in the US, where online penetration is at 80-odd%, and it has been 80-odd% for the last few years. That means whoever had to be online in the US has already been online. It's now basically the kids who are growing up who are now coming online. It's not the case in India. A lot of people are now starting moving towards the online channel now, and it continues to grow. So because the incremental net new online users are going to continue to grow, the tenure isn't going to necessarily shift dramatically in the next couple of years. But what that means is, even if there are 5%, people who are tenured, that's still a large pool of people who are tenured in India. So, all right, if there are, yep.
How do you see the purchasing power change for the consumers? The e-commerce penetration that we have today is the 20 to 35, maybe somewhere there, but who do not have the purchase power. The purchasing power is sitting with people on the other side of the age barrier, right?
So let me make sure I understand your question correctly. You're saying, is the purchasing power going to change? Because generally people who are online today are the 25 to 30-year-olds who don't necessarily have a lot of money. It's their parents or people who are 30 to 50-year-old who have a lot more money and they're not necessarily online. So I don't necessarily buy that completely. And the reason is the 25 to 30-year-olds may not be making that much money, but largely stay at home and are not paying mortgages and rent. So they have a lot of money to spend. And it's not always about purchasing power. Purchasing power is important, but if you think about why somebody buys online, price is important, availability of products is important, convenience is important. So if you are 25 to 35-year-old and you're net savvy and you're comfortable with the net and you need to buy a backpack, right? A simple category of backpack. Well, it's a small ticket item. You're busy with your work. You know what? Then convenience will play a role. As long as the pricing is the same and you're able to sort of get the fast track color of backpack that you need and it's available online because it's easier, that's why people will buy it. Now, will the 35 to 50-year-olds buy online? Yeah, but that's a slow, gradual process because, people don't come to the internet just because it's there. People come to the internet because it serves a utilitarian process. Now, my dad, he's 60 plus. He's starting to come online, not because he wants to buy, but because he likes to pay his LIC premiums online. So, think about sort of from a behavioral perspective, he's starting to using services and utilities and paying those bills online, and that's going to change that behavior. Now he's going to be more comfortable. So people come online primarily from a utilitarian or an entertainment perspective. I actually get Facebook invites from my chachas, and that's why I'm closing down my Facebook account because I don't want my chacha to have my, But he's coming for entertainment perspective, or he's coming from a utilitarian perspective. So that's going to take time. But I don't. There's a notion, if you look at the demographic profile of who is more likely to buy online versus less likely to buy online, the sweetest target spot from a demographic perspective is 25 to 34-year-olds, people who make enough money and have enough disposable income. Those are the most net savvy, most sophisticated, most aggressive buyers online, regardless of which market you're in. I think we have to wrap up. Sure.
One off-context question. Yes, please. How can you get off or close your Facebook account?
How can I close my Facebook? I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm not that. The only way I can close my Facebook account, I don't go there.
Sir, moment you get it, please leave.
Yeah, I will, definitely. All right, well, thank you very much. I'm going to be around for a few. If you need any questions, if you have any, please do stop by. But thanks very much for attending.